Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to Front and Center, where we focus on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concern the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of these and more will be Front and Center. And you can watch this program on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, that's Radyo Pilipinas World Service. And this program, Front and Center, can also be heard on the following shortwave frequencies: 12.010 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.820 MHz. So join us for another edition of Front and Center with your host, Jerome Toledo. And for this edition of Front and Center, we have on the line is the fellow of the Octa Research Group to explain the recent Tugon ng Masa, or similarly, a People's Survey regarding the published report on the self-rated hunger and poverty in the third quarter of the year, which covers from August 28th to September 2nd. So the self-rated poverty in the Philippines has dropped in the third quarter of 2024, with about 43% of Filipino families, or approximately 11.3 million, considering themselves poor, according to the latest research or latest survey conducted by Octa Research. And to explain that survey further, we now have Professor Ranjit Rai of the Octa Research Group. Thank you so much for joining us in the program, Professor Ranjit.
Yes, hi. Greetings to you and to all of our televiewers in the Philippines and all around the world.
All right. So let me start with this question, Professor Ranjit. So how is the self-hunger and poverty rate survey was measured by Octa Research? So can you can you expound to that?
Okay. Well, we conducted research nationwide from August 28th to September 2. We do this on a quarterly basis, and we reported the results in the third quarter. We wanted to, we want to emphasize to all those listening that the number of respondents, around 1,200 adult Filipinos, male and female, and it was taken all around the country. And of course, the margin of error is ±3. Okay, and the findings were very positive. Hunger and poverty dipped in the third quarter. It's still substantial. When we talk about self-rated poverty, we ask people, are they poorer now than last quarter? And this is, of course, self-rated. This is not based on statistics like income, which is the basis for official statistics on poverty. This is really just their estimation, their perception of whether they're poorer now than they were the last quarter. And just to give you a story, through the year, first and second quarter, you saw an upward trend in poverty, and so in the third quarter, it's very positive that we observe this new trend downwards. Okay. And just to give you a sense, those who rated themselves as poor in the second quarter was 48% of Filipino families. We have around a little over 26 million families in the country. And of that, 48%, nearly half, that's 12.7 million Filipinos in the second quarter who rated themselves poor. So the situation was dire in the second quarter. It was an upward trend from the first. And in the third quarter, it went down by 5 percentage points. That's a huge amount. You have to understand, 5 percentage points. Anything over 3 percentage points, which is the margin of error, and close to 5%, a little over, over 5% is substantial change as far as Octa Research is concerned for a survey of 1,200 respondents. And so the change, the downward dip, was 5%. That's around 1.4 million families who basically are out of poverty, from at least based on their own self-perception. So let me repeat that: 48% in the second quarter, 12 million, a little over 12 million, and now it's 43%. That's a 5 percentage point drop, and today we have 11.3. Now it's still substantial, but a million people, 1.4 million families, if you want to get the estimate of number of people, that's you multiply that by 4.3, and it's a number of Filipinos are affected. So any a percentage drop in poverty is always good, and it underscores a notable shift in self-perceptions on poverty during that period.
So,
That's just for self-rated poverty. Now, it wasn't just self-rated poverty, it was also self-rated hunger. See, we basically asked our adult Filipinos if they experience involuntary hunger, defined as having gone without food at least once in the last 3 months prior to the survey. And again, this is self-perception. And just like with poverty in the second quarter, it rose. Okay, it rose to around 16%. Okay, okay, and in the third quarter, from 16%, okay, it went down to, of course, 11%.
I see.
Okay, not remember, we only rated those who experienced this. No, of those who experienced this, we saw from the second quarter to the third quarter a 5 percentage drop in the number of people who rate themselves as hungry. The decrease is approximately 1.3 million families who no longer faced hunger in the third quarter. So let's review that again. In the third quarter, we saw a decline from 16% of people who rated themselves poor to 11%. That's around 2.9 million families who are hungry. 2.9. Now, that's down from 4.2 million families. The change is around 1.3 million families, which we feel is a significant decline in poverty in the third quarter. So those are two excellent news items. No? Self-rated poverty declines in the third quarter, and self-rated poverty declines also.
I see. But I would like to note that Professor Ranjit, that self-rated poverty, of course, it decreased by certain numbers, but at the same
Five
time,
percentage points. That's a significant number. 5 percentage points. And while other probes, you could be a little lax about certain changes, but these changes are actually number of people who call themselves poor and who experience poverty. So we're always very sensitive about that. This particular probe, any slight drops, we report, as long as it's above the margin of error, because this actually means families, everyday Filipinos who either experience more poverty or less poverty, or who experience hunger.
but of but the self-rated poverty decreased by 7 percentage points in Balance Luzon from 37 to 30%. So as well as in Mindanao by 17 percentage points from 77 to 60%. So there's a certain area that recorded a decrease on self-rated poverty. However, Professor Ranjit, poverty rate increased in the National Capital Region, so that rose from 28% to 35%, and in Visayas from 52% to 59%. So given that majority of the regions in the country reported significant increase in the poverty rate, should the government really needs to focus on addressing the poverty in these regions?
I think the approach should be holistic. It should be the whole. No? But there's been an inordinate focus really on Mindanao, and that's why you saw a significant drop in Mindanao. Balance Luzon has been going down for some time, largely because this area has been, an epicenter for development, for growth. During in the year, no, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of businesses and a lot of economic activity happened here, and the coverage was still before major typhoons hit it. I don't expect that this will be the same after this major typhoons, no, hit
Mm-hmm.
over the next few weeks, no. But that being said, it also reflects the general trend in the country where inflation has gone down, joblessness has gone down, and therefore more people are accessible to jobs and income that could have, um, changed their self-perception of poverty and, of course, the actual situation of hunger.
Okay. So, how is this poverty rate across the country will going to dictate the policies of the government in addressing the poverty in the country? So, how?
Okay. Well, I think most economists, official poverty experts don't actually utilize this as much as their income-based approach, no? Which, by the way, is much lower, no? If you look at actual poverty rates in the country, it's below 20%, not in the 40% here that we see, no?
Mm-hmm.
But then these are all based on studies, no, like the Family Income and Expenditure Survey, which is done every 3 years now. So interim, there's really no there are very few studies that look at poverty on a quarterly basis, and that's why this is where survey companies become relevant. No, we produce poverty,
Mm-hmm.
self-rated poverty, which is a perception.
Mm-hmm.
The actual poverty might be much lower, based on the income studies of the administration or the government at the time. But since they do it on every 2 or 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
they follow. We don't have quarterly what you call this what you call this readings of where
Mm-hmm.
of poverty in the country, and that is where the value of these studies come in, because we give them a picture. While the metrics are different, at least we give them a picture on a quarter to quarter basis on how effective their anti-poverty programs are.
Mm-hmm.
And what seems to be clear is that in the third quarter, from an upward trend, it shifted to a downward trend. Now, can we sustain this in the fourth
Mm-hmm.
quarter? I'm hopeful,
Mm-hmm.
especially because the fourth quarter is the strongest quarter as far as the economy
Mm-hmm.
is concerned, going towards Christmas.
Yeah.
A lot of remittances come in
Yeah.
because people start sending money for
And
Christmas
people
and
are
getting
around
jobs.
shopping.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully, but
Mm-hmm.
another study, another estimate of the banks, no, looking at the economy, is that consumer expenditure has gone down. A large killer to all of this is really inflation.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. And while it has eased, it was only felt in the third quarter. The easing has already been happening since the
Mm-hmm.
second quarter, and but people only feel the effects after 2 or 3 quarters, and this is why we saw a dip as far as our survey is concerned, and
Mm-hmm.
it's consistent with what many of the changes that's happening as far as the economy is concerned, but also reflective of where the government has been spending a lot of its own
Mm-hmm.
resources. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
significant story is really in Mindanao,
Mm-hmm.
where in the first quarter, nearly 7 out of 10 Filipinos rated themselves as poor.
Mm-hmm. And
And
mm-hmm.
the government really listened to that and poured in a lot of resources. In the first quarter, you have to understand that's the impact of La Nina. No, El Nino, I'm sorry, El
Mm-hmm.
Nino, on the farming communities in Mindanao, where a lot of people suffered. It's
So,
too hot. The drought that created that change in the climate affected many of the communities living on farming.
mm-hmm.
And so, the government poured in a lot of resources in those
Mm-hmm.
areas in Mindanao. And now
Correct.
you're seeing the effect. No? The
Mm-hmm.
same goes for Balanced Luzon.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of anti-poverty programs were rolled there.
Mm-hmm.
Important stories, of course, Visayas, where there's still,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all throughout the year, Visayas has been a challenge. and largely because it's also affected by weather disturbances. The first, no, and so these are the constant and continuing challenge for the administration. I don't know if they're going to end poverty, no, which is I doubt, no, but definitely hunger has improved a lot, and maybe that's something that the government can, with many of their own programs, target, no,
All
at
right.
least reducing it, and I think they're on the right path. When if you look at the quarterly self-rated poverty surveys.
Okay.
But again, the economy is still recovering. Inflation is still high for many Filipinos, and you can see that in the other probes that accompanied this particular report on perceptions about hunger, the state of hunger, which by the way worsened. When people are asked if they're hungry, many of them would say, a lot of them now say they're not, no.
All
But
right.
when you ask them, is the state of hunger in the country worsening? And basically the answer is yes, no. So again, that leads to the three that's consistent with our other probe, which we will be reporting soon on urgent national and personal concerns, which basically say that most Filipinos have three top concerns. Number one, the prices of goods and services. Their basic argument is, the state has to manage inflation. Number two, wages are stagnant. They have jobs, yes, and it's not the problem. The problem is the wages are low. Okay. Number three is accessible, cheap food. So these are some things that are, so our survey is consistent as far as that picture is concerned. So that's why the
All
government
right.
has to listen to these surveys. We're not the only one saying this. That the focus really is how we can make, let's say, for example, food inflation, how government intervention can bring down the inflation as far as food, particularly rice, is
Right.
concerned. Especially now we're entering the fourth quarter, where demand for rice and others and basic goods, no, like sibuyas, garlic,
Yeah.
and all of the things for Noche Buena and for the Christmas season is high. No,
Yeah.
government has to find a
That's right.
way to provide safety nets, no, as
Safety
well
nets.
as intervene to challenge, no, negative market behavior, cartels and monopolies
Okay.
that tend to distort the prices of these
Okay.
basic commodities.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So the numbers are good, of course, Professor Ranjit, for balanced Luzon, but not for the rest of the country, including the Metro Manila area. So also achieving low or nearly zero poverty rate is still a long shot. So it's a long road ahead, Professor Ranjit. So if you are going to report this survey to President Marcos, which he chairs the NEDA board, what can you recommend ways to alleviate poverty?
Well, I think continue rolling out the anti-poverty programs. The government can do only so much. No, a lot of it has to do also with the private sector. A lot of it has to do with the economics of the global economy. Okay, we're still experiencing bottlenecks. We're still experiencing the high prices, such as the price of petroleum. Although rice prices have already stabilized, so the president really has to just keep his eye on the ball, which is provide social services, expedite government infrastructure, because that has a massive impact, no, multiplier effect on the economy. Look at efficiently implementing, okay, diffusing government anti-poor programs of the government. We have a lot of ayuda going around, no, more than
Yeah,
100 billion. If you look at all the
support,
the
financial support.
ayuda that's been organized by government, ACAP, IX, there's different names. I think the goal for the DSWD and for the other agencies involved, like the DOLE, is to distribute it efficiently and really target the poor. Okay,
Right.
inflation, I think, will ease, and if other interventions like the reduction of the tariffs on rice, plus efficient, no, enforcement, no, of rules and regulations as far as the trading of rice is concerned, I think those in the medium term, short to medium term, will bring price down. And so that's the challenge for government. There has some political will has to be involved, no, in further improving the situation for many of our kababayans. The government is trying. It's slashed significant amount of tariff on rice, hoping that it will go down. But the distribution centers are very few, and that has to be expanded. Yung Kadiwa network natin,
Right.
For rice. But rice has gone down in those distribution centers by at least 5 pesos. But it's still expensive for many Filipinos. I think a lot has to do with looking at these negative distortions, no, created by, or distortions created by these cartels and monopolies in the various food or commodities being distributed in the country. If we can find a way through government intervention to reduce the impact of that, I'm very sure many more Filipinos will be less poor, will perceive themselves as poor. Many more Filipinos will perceive themselves as hungry.
All right. Okay. And those are the things that you're going to suggest to President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
But of course, we have to pat them on the back, no, because it went down 5 percentage points. It may not be big for others, but for Okta, 1 million families are less poor and less hungry this quarter. We hope the trend will continue, but will only continue if certain, in the medium term, if certain interventions are made by government. I said a couple of them already. And in the long term, the government, together with the private sector, address structural distortions, no, in the economy, whether it's in the production of rice self-sufficiency, massive infrastructure work, government intervention and investment in people through education and health. These are the long-term structural challenges the government has to face. And while it still has time, I think it should just focus on that. And every time they do something good, you'll notice, my friend, when government does good, people appreciate and people resonate in the surveys the impact of the positive intervention of government. So every time there's good governance, you'll see it in the survey also.
Okay. So, Professor Ranjit, so survey are just numbers, but a good and sound government policies regarding addressing inflation, poverty will make a difference.
Yeah, it has. I think that's the statement I want to make, because I'm also aware of how much government has poured into places like Mindanao, the Balanced Luzon, even in the Visayas. And so you're seeing all of these changes, on the whole, positive changes. So whenever government focuses less on politics, focuses more on program implementation,
That's a good point.
focuses on policies that benefit the faceless, the voiceless, the powerless in a society, you get all these positive changes on a quarterly basis.
Okay. And with that, thank you so much for joining us again in the program, Professor Ranjit Rai of the Okta Research Group. We've just discussed about the self-rated hunger or poverty, and also poverty rate that was released by Okta Research Group that covers the third quarter of this year. So thank you so much, Professor Ranjit Rai, for joining us.
Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to share our data with the public. Thank you.
Okay. And that concludes this edition of Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Together with our producer Erwin Peñano and technical personnel Milo Junella, join us again here on Front and Center. This is your host Jerome Toledo saying mabuhay, love the Philippines.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.